Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the COVID series, where we have speakers from all over the world come and share us their insights about how they can help the sales profession. Today, we actually have international guests. We have Professor Silvio Cardinelli from Politecnico della Marche from Ancona, and we have Professor Hari Terho from University of Turku, a senior research professor there as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, and I want to tell you why I reached out to you. So one of the things that we've been discussing when we've talked to other professionals and academics has got to do with how the COVID pandemic is reshaping part of the sales function. Now, it's still up for grabs whether this is going to continue on once the economy picks up. But to a large extent, there seems to be a consensus amongst a lot of academics as well as practitioners that we talk to, managers that we talk to, who say that salespeople have to become more digitally savvy. And digitally savvy to a lot of them is understanding how to use social media. And when we were looking at this, when we were trying to advise some of the managers, I was really surprised to find a wonderful article that you gentlemen wrote along with two of your other co-authors in 2019, which I think is very, very relevant, where you call for more research to be done in the domain of how salespeople can use social media. But what I really liked about it was in B2B context. So I'm going to begin with asking Silvio, and then Hari, I'll come back to you on that one, is how did you get started on this research?
Yeah, but as you know, it's not easy. There is not a real plan. Something happened. Have a chat with Ari probably 3 years ago, and we say, okay, we can do something together.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, we tried to merge together the few topics from my topic is research on sales, and the topic of a colleague of mine is also co-author, Federica Pascucci and Chiara Ancillai, and say, okay, let's put together and try to say something together. And what we can do? Let's talk with Hari Terho, and Hari Terho gives to us a real different point of view of how we can say merging sales and social media. And so we start this new project on social selling.
Yeah.
You know, our research is a qualitative research. We started from a systematical literature review. Clearly, it's not a large literature just because it's
Absolutely.
a pretty new topic. But one of the first aspects is that there is a lot of different point of view on this topic. And so one of the best aspects of our research is try to create a common background of that research and just to refine to create the definition. So, but I try to say, okay, there is a lot of point of view. This is what the common point of view. To do that, I don't want to say the definition just because it's the part of the activity of Ari. But what I want to say is that just to not be in front of the mirror, but we try to collect information abroad. So we starting to contact the 100 most important influencer all around the world about social selling, and we started to talk with them. We collect this information and we decide to put in our article the definition with all many other stuff. But Ari, what about this definition?
Well, before I do that, I think it's really what I really loved about the article for everybody is the fact that instead of just talking to other academics, a lot of it was actually talking to real life influencers in social media space who are actually doing it. So essentially, it's not that, yes, you did a lot of academic work, but to make it relevant, you actually talked to people in the industry or people who are actually trying to use social media to sell. So Hari, so from what I hear from Silvio, that you actually also had a very important role in shaping the agenda for this research. So tell us about why you suggested that both Silvio and the team that you worked on, why would you want to focus on social media?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this discussion. Yeah. Yeah, we were kind of discussing what kind of, how should we study social media and study to look the literature, and what we kind of found out that there is quite a lot research kind of studying in sales about social media, but it's more or less just kind of finding out that whether salespeople use social media and to what kind of things does that correlate. There is much less kind of understanding what really how salespeople and sales organizations leverage social media in their kind of sales activities. So we took that as a starting point. And I think that this is really an important topic, since we know that the customers' buying behavior has dramatically shifted in the recent years. So there is a need for firms to somehow interact with their customers in a way, in those touch points where the customers are searching for information and wanting to kind of be.
Indeed. Fantastic. So for that, I think one of the things that we were also looking into it. So for me, the topic caught my attention mostly because of the fact that, well, you two are cool guys, of course, that's a different story. But the whole idea was that we were getting a lot of questions from people in the business saying that social media still is not relevant in the B2B space. And if I'm talking about B2B space, I'm even going to differentiate between B2B pure services sector and B2B in the traditional products/services sector, right? Yeah. So the idea was that they sort of understood that, but you always had this hands-off approach towards social media in B2B, saying that in our company, it's not necessary. Our salespeople do most of the job. But it's actually mostly because of COVID that suddenly everybody's starting to even consider it, right? So, so you guys started working on this even before COVID. So, but my question to either one of you, I'm probably going to begin with Silvio, is: did you actually have, so when you did this research, but did you also have questions coming to you from practitioners about, yeah, people are talking about social media, but how do I get my sales teams to be using social media?
Yeah, clearly, as you mentioned before, this period put the light on the different kind of tools. Differently from the consumer side, many companies from B2B should be not very interesting in the first phase of the development of the social media, just because they say, yeah, no, our business is a face-to-face business. Yeah. So we don't need that. It's a waste of time. It's a marketing issue. It's not a sales. But we know what is the reality. This reality is that marketing and sales in B2B are very close. And there is a really great transformation in terms of buyer behavior. Yeah. The practitioner report is crystal clear on that point of view. The large part of the C-suite starting to have a look on social media and just to starting the journey. We know that. We know that social media now could have an influence on that. What could be the one of the element that was not the catch the expectation of the company is that for many companies, social selling was starting to sell more in a while. Yeah. But this is not true. It's a long journey. Because we know that this is part of the journey, but it's not meaning that if you put a post on LinkedIn, there is an increase of your turnover. Yes. Our research is crystal clear on that. It's a long journey. And many many articles in different journals say that the soft outcome of the activity, like the increase of quality of relation, is pretty important, but not necessarily the effect is too directly connected to turnover. Just because it's a long journey. Indeed. And I love it. Clearly now there is probably we are attending to the most digital transformation that we ever had in the last 3 months of 3 years or 5 years, or I don't know why. So there is a little bit difference.
Indeed. But I like it because one of the things I see on social media right now is you talking about social media. There's a lot of things on LinkedIn and Facebook that now says what led to the digital transformation speeding up in your company. And they say the CEO, the CFO, and in the same C, they now have COVID, saying that the digital transformation in companies, and I saw it on social media. I just thought I would say this, and it's really funny from that perspective. And Harry, from your perspective, I know that for the longest time that Finland as a country has invested a lot in how technology is reshaping the buying function, as well as what does it mean for the sales function, right? So from that perspective, was this research in line with the trends that you saw already happening in Finland, where our image of Finland is where people are much more technologically savvy and they'll adapt it? So what is your opinion on, before COVID, what was the state of knowledge about social selling in B2B sectors?
Well, I would say that varies quite a lot from firm to firm and perhaps among the industries as well. If you take the ICT sector, for example, I think firms are really, they have gone and invested into these issues quite a lot. But also in kind of, I would say, in conservative industries, some industry leading firms are quite heavily investing into these issues, especially when it comes into kind of selling complex solutions or something value added offerings, where you really have to be early to influence how customers frame their problems and kind of not just contact or interact with the customers only at that stage when the customers contact you and say, we want to buy this. So really industry leading firms have really, some of the firms I've discussed with, they have really emphasized the programmatic emphasis on leveraging social media so that the networks of the salespeople, so they can kind of use their networks and also build up a kind of personal brand with the firm content, so that when customers are searching for information, they suddenly know that, hey, this firm is overall, and they seem to be experts on these things. They are kind of thought leaders. So I really see that in very kind of traditional industry firms as well.
Indeed. That's very, very interesting that you talk about this, because we had a paper some time back which is looking at building personal brands and personal branding. And what I really liked about your paper, and we can get into now the crux of your paper as well, is what I really like is that building a personal brand in B2B is not just the job of the salesperson alone, right? And that's why I really liked your paper. And that's my question to Silvio, because one of the things that you mentioned is no man or no human is an island. That is, you need the help from other people as well. So one of the things I liked in your model that you propose is that in B2B selling, for you to get your salespeople to be using social media, you also need organizational support and focus and strategy, right? So tell me a little bit, because that's what we found in our research as well. And that's what I like about your research is it's not because it was kind of agreeing with what we were saying, but it's more along the lines of, it makes sense that salespeople, for them to use social media, will need help in terms of how to sell on social media, and also on the stories that we need to tell. So tell me a little bit more about that part, about why you thought about organizational part as one of the key variables in driving that.
I think that this part is one of the key points. You know that sales, selling activities sometimes related to lonely activity. Is you know, in the past, if you talk about hard selling, you think that you are alone. Okay. In Italy, we say that you are a solitary wolf. Okay, like a salesman. What you discover is a confirm of that to do social selling, you cannot do alone. Okay. For a different elements. The first one is that you need the support of your company, different kind of support. the first one is the commitment that you need from your boss or your organization. Okay. The second one, you need a long-term strategy just to allow the single salesman just to have a look to in front of you and start to work on that. The third element, you need content.
Yeah.
I need to key point is to need content. Just because, you know, B2B selling is not only a relation activity, it's also a knowledge activity.
Andy.
So one of the key issues is to bring the knowledge not only from personal level to social selling level. So you need the support, and in this aspect, one of the other element is the relevant of support of the sales department, not the sales department to the marketing department, from the marketing department to the sales department, just to work together on the content. Because sometimes the content is on the mind of the salesman. Indeed. So you need to make an exploitation on that knowledge, because working on these two parts, relationship and knowledge, is a great way just to make the big business.
Indeed. And for me, that's, I think, should be the key takeaway to a lot of sales organizations looking at social selling, is that it's not that, okay, we're going to use LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or we want all of you to have a social media profile, but that's just the beginning, right? As you said, you need to have a very clear view on how we want to use this. I think one of the things that you also mentioned is you need the support of your manager, because I guess one of the things that, which I also took away from this, maybe it's something that not maybe explicitly said, but that's what I took away from your paper, was that it actually...
give you a practical example. One of the companies say, yes, during this journey, we decide to have a journalist inside.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a B2B company.
Yeah.
Because we need a journalist, because we need the content. We need to transform our knowledge in an article.
Wow. This is amazing, because that calls for support. Right? But there are two things here, right? One is either the salesperson has to create the content themselves. It may not be as good like a journalist, but creating that content takes time. Because one of the critiques I hear from a lot of salespeople is, I have to spend a lot of time to create content. And if I do that, my boss has to be supportive, because that means that it has to come from the same time that I would be visiting other customers, right? So that was one. The other thing which we also heard was that a lot of salespeople were kind of afraid that they would look silly when they use social media. So I really think that the right kind of content with the right kind of support is going to be extremely critical. And that's what I thought was very interesting, that you focused on that part in your research, because I think that's so critical. Hadi, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, kind of we identified kind of social selling organizational strategy elements, and exactly as you mentioned, kind of the content, organizational content creation, and organizational systems or sales enablement software that really enables the kind of the internal sharing of the organizational content to the salespersons. They were really emphasized, kind of, if you want to kind of make a systematical social media presence through your salespeople network, that really kind of requires that the salespeople are not just alone doing something, but they also have the support from the organization about kind of relevant topics that matter to the customer, and also kind of integrating various types of market listening systems to the CRM, so that the salespeople know kind of, for example, in what stage of the buying journey their customers are, and they can kind of adapt what kind of content you want to kind of share with your customers, and so on.
So essentially, so what I'm hearing you say is that social media selling, because traditionally the people look at social media and B2B as a following. That's my opinion, that's my experience. You correct me if I'm wrong, but your company has a LinkedIn page. They now ask your salespeople to also create a LinkedIn page because of COVID. That's what's happening. That's what I hear happening. And then they say, it's clearly, anytime our marketing team posts something on social media, Your job is to repost it. Right? And I understand that for companies, it's a journey. That's what I really like about what Silvio said, is it's a journey. And the fact is that, but part of the journey is just getting your salespeople comfortable with using social media and then start looking at it. And I also love the idea of a journalist, because at the end of the day, the journalist would be the one who knows exactly how to bring the same content in a Twitter format or in a LinkedIn format. And essentially the way you communicate is complete. And I love that idea. I think it's a great idea that once in a while, if you are going to be using social in a B2B context, it would probably pay you. It would actually make you better to actually invest in getting good content writers. And from
you don't want to just kind of talk about your products, but rather kind of you should understand kind of the customer problems, customer challenges.
Absolutely.
And create content that tackles those. And that's what you want to do.
So guys, tell me about this. And I think this time I'll begin with Hardy and then I'll move to Silvio. Is one of the things that maybe I missed in your article, but maybe you have it in your head, is the concept of storytelling, right? So there's a lot of talk about the fact that if you use social media, it should be like you're trying to tell a story, not any story, but story that is relevant to the customers. Huh? So please tell me, and this is kind of a nice connection between the organizational approach towards things and the personal approach towards salespeople doing it as well. To what extent is storytelling in social media formats going to be critical in the B2B space?
Yeah, I think this social selling, it's about sharing valuable content.
Yeah.
But I think kind of when it comes to individual level and kind of being present and kind of using social media, you shouldn't just be kind of forcing something out that this is the company materials and I'm forcing kind of this, I'm using a forced approach to share this. I think kind of it should be somehow natural to discuss people, kind of how they are used to kind of deal with their customers, and they know their customers. So it's about adapting the way of using the social media into what you personally, how you do it. And also I think kind of the storytelling relates to that kind of.
How it relates to indeed.
You want to talk about the customer problems, not about your products, and the storytelling relates to that. So you should use, I think quite many of the interviewees mentioned kind of these reference cases, how I was able to help my customers earlier, what kind of insights I have about market, about developments, about news, and kind of making that content into a story format. It should be interesting to the customers.
Absolutely. I love it. So now here is the next thing. Here's my question to you. So while you did the studies, it's great, but I actually have two contrasting cultures in Finland and Italy. Now, you know where I'm going to go with this. Imagine that you're a global organization. You want to have a social media strategy, but you have this traditional idea of Finland as one way of actually communicating. And you have the traditional image that people have of Italians communicating. Now, to what extent should your social media strategy, if you're a global organization, also take this into consideration? Because storytelling could mean different things in different contexts, right? So do you think that is also important for you to understand that there's a cultural aspect to social? When I'm talking of cultural, not an organizational culture, but your country culture. Also, do you think that's important? I know it might not have been something that you studied, but I would like to have your opinions on that as well. Silvia,
you touched upon a very big issue. It's big, a lot of problem just to manage for the companies. The question is yes, clearly the content, because the content could be very effective in one culture and totally disappointed in another. But the other question it is also where you need your, for example, social media team. Should be in Asia or should be in Europe. So where is this group? So clearly, in that point, have an overall policy.
Yeah.
A major key point to respect all around the world is critical, because the risk is to go to the anarchy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Indeed.
And it is very risky for each brand all around the world, also in B2B.
Yeah.
Okay? You need clarity, a key point and a strategy.
Yeah.
In the major nation, in the major country, you need to have an adaptation.
Yeah.
But also your salesman in that side can do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because keeping in consideration that you cannot manage all the social selling activity at the organizational level.
Yeah.
The involvement should be very strong at personal level, it's individual level of salesman.
Indeed.
This is social selling, not only a marketing issue.
Yeah. Indeed. And I love this, because that's one of the things which is a nice thing, because what I like in your model is that, unlike other studies, which I'm sure is going to develop future, is that you talk about the organizational responsibility. There's also a personal responsibility too, right? That what should salespeople be doing as well? Because that's one of the things which I also really loved about it, that it looks like you have two separate blocks, but actually they fit into each other, right? Because as Silvio just said, is an organization can set this up, but they can set certain boundaries. But the idea, if that is, if you're a global organization, especially, you should still trust your salespeople, empower your salespeople to be able to adapt according to the local customs and local ways of telling stories. So that is what I really liked about it. And Hari, you mentioned something earlier. You said you have to adapt according to the buying cycle of the customer. You have to look at what is culture. Tell me a little bit more about that part. Whose responsibility is that? Is marketing going to come up with the content and then you leave it up to the salesperson to say, maybe this time I'm going to talk about this part of the customer journey? Maybe this time, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think kind of when we talk about selling, it's kind of the salespeople kind of have the closest customer kind of understanding.
Yeah.
Kind of related to what we discussed earlier, just 1 minute ago, the firms kind of emphasize that you need to have some kind of social media policy. It's kind of that these are the limits and boundaries. And then the salespeople can adapt and make it kind of an approach that they are using. And the best practice firms quite clearly try to kind of assist their salespeople so that they have as much customer information as possible. And also the salespeople themselves in the individual level, quite many of the our study participants emphasize that the social media is such a rich source of customer insights. So you can actually use the social media to understand your customer organizations better, various stakeholders, the buying center, even kind of the quality of the kind of lead quality aspects that whether this applies. So I think when we are talking about selling, the organization needs to support the salespeople and encourage them, motivate them, and give means to succeed. But then it's kind of the individuals who do it.
Indeed. And I think that's one of the things that I really, really liked about it, saying that it's actually a combination of both. And now, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask each one of you one last question about this research. And I strongly urge the others to take a look at it. Now, my question to Silvio is, should salespeople's key performance indicators moving forward also include their social media presence and activities?
Yeah, all the activity of the compensation also is moving from the hard outcome to the soft outcome. I think that this part should be necessary to include in that, just because it's not a question of money, it's a question of culture. Because if you look at this KPI, it's relevant for you because it's relevant for all of your customer journal of your sales process. This is a key point, not only in terms of future results, but in terms of change of culture. Now, if you are too focused on hard results, so turnover,
Yes.
to be pretty risky, especially in that kind of period.
Okay. And now my question, so thank you so much for that, Silvio. So my last question to Harry is the fact is that, to what extent is it the job of marketing or is it the job of sales to do? And I think the fact that we are hearing is the idea is content creation, and that's what I like: content creation, content curation, and content dissemination, right? So the idea is that who creates the content, who kind of, I like the idea of what Sylvia said about the company, saying you have a journalist who curates the content, who tries to write it up in that way, right? And dissemination. So what role does marketing play, and what role, in your opinion, should sales play in these three? Again, content creation, who's responsible for it? I'll try to break it down according to you.
I think kind of the content creation, the organization has a clear role. Yeah. Especially, I think there are always kind of some odd wolves who really kind of shine in doing something. Yeah. But if you want to kind of make the social selling a kind of systematic, programmatic approach, then the marketing has to be involved or sales management and marketing together. They have to be involved in kind of content creation. But also kind of, I think the salespeople have the best insights, the customer problems and how the content should be done. Actually, the salespeople have a clear role together with the marketing to kind of develop the content.
Indeed.
And I think kind of the content that applies to the organizational kind of marketing distributed forms, but also I think the social selling can be a powerful approach when all the salespeople kind of leverage that to their own personal networks.
Indeed.
And it's not perhaps, it can be also other non-sales individuals who participate into this. For example, R&D or technical specialists, as kind of we know that the buying centers involve so many various target groups. So I really think that these principles, there has to be kind of both levels involved.
So we are not, so I still have two more. So that's great. So let's say, for example, you have Silvio, we have the other co-authors, and they were all talking to Hari, right? But the fact is that that's a lot of information, a lot of content being created. But content curation is that, but who do you think is responsible for taking all the content and distilling it to something in social media format? And I really like what the example of a journalist doing that for a customer, because a journalist might not be a product expert, but will know how to take that and make it into a story, right? So my question is, so your content creation, but content curation is, how do I curate that, all that information, and into a kind of a social media post and strategy? Is it marketing? Is it sales? Because now it's mostly coming into marketing and sales, right? Because if your salespeople have to start using it, so who do you think is going to be responsible for that part, that decision about what specifically goes in? I just want your opinion. I understand that it's going to be, and we are all going to, as academics, we always say it depends. But if I were to ask Hari, and then I'll ask Sylvia the same, who do you think is responsible for that?
I think that relates into kind of your recent paper on sales enablement. So I think there should be some people involved who have a responsibility about thinking kind of what kind of content pieces we have to create some kind of content portfolio, and make sure that the salespeople have some kind of system where they can kind of pick right types of contents to right types of kind of situations, or having a programmatic approach for kind of when we launch new products, or there is some kind of market happening. So I have then available content.
Indeed.
So,
indeed. Perfect.
It's hard to give a feedback, but anyway, both are responsible of their own content. Just because the company should have probably their own institutional content. So It could cure
Nice, yeah.
and develop and deliver also. But the salesman should work on its side, because clearly if you post your new product, you say, okay, that's great. I have to create my content. I have to work on that. Clearly coherent with will be the global strategy. So what is the key point is to try to involve with few marketing skill all your sales organization.
Love it. I love this. If that's the case, you can also think about customer service too, right? Because
It's not easy.
It's not easy, but I like it, right? Because otherwise it defeats the purpose. That's why we actually have a negative perception of social media, being that it's not relevant in B2B cases, probably because you do not have personalized or customized content that salespeople are comfortable saying that we want to put it out there. And my last question, actually, this is again goes back into the idea of if dissemination, right? So the idea is dissemination is how do I then take and communicate this. So I've come up with the content, and now I've curated the content to make sure what is relevant. I have a strategy and I want to post it. And now I actually have to do the dissemination. I actually have to send out and post this as well. Now, to what extent do you think that you observe that sometimes your LinkedIn page might not be in sync with what your salespeople are posting? Then you have a big problem because your company content might not always match what the salespeople are saying. So do you think that that is also something that has to be coordinated? But then that completely defeats the purpose of empowerment, right? You say your salespeople, but if you don't coordinate, you're going to have one set of messages being posted by marketing and another set of things happening by salespeople, all within legal limits. So again, I'll take both of your opinions for this. So let's probably begin with Silvio this time. What are your thoughts on that one? Coordinating that phased out strategy.
Yeah, well, the question, if you make the interview separately, Harry and I,
yes,
you will find the same problem if we are not coordinate. This is the main issue.
Indeed, eh?
So it's a big problem. Just because there is at organizational level, you probably have a common background. But at states level, you have to manage heterogeneity in terms of generation, in terms of culture, in terms of education, in terms of really personal experience. So it's not easy to make the policy inside the brain of a single salesman. Just are able to interpret it the same way. Keep also in consideration that part of these sales people say that probably in the past said that the social media was wasted of time. Just because they are not directly in front of the salesman, of the customer, to generate turnover, revenue, margin, and so on.
Harry?
I would say kind of one interesting thing is that kind of, if you think marketing and sales, traditionally they have been kind of two opposite kind of functions, always fighting, and the alignment has been always a huge problem. Kind of now when I'm kind of doing interviews and kind of interacting with the practitioners, I'm really seeing a change at the moment through the digitalization. In quite many of the companies who are really good in digital marketing, digital content marketing, and at the same time doing social sales or having this, I think kind of somehow this approach unites kind of the these two functions, and suddenly kind of the lead generation prospecting kind of process, they both play a role. And I think in quite many companies, the culture has changed, and actually the two functions are collaborating. Not in a forced way, but really kind of seeing the value of the marketing, or marketing is seeing that hey, we can really kind of give good quality leads and support the salespeople when they are kind of doing their sales approach. So I really see that there is a cultural change happening at the moment, which also kind of perhaps diminishes the problems of having different messages.
Good. Perfect. So gentlemen, that's all the time we have for. Thank you so much for taking time off your schedules to talk to me and the audience who will be viewing this as well. I wish you all the best in your future research. And again, for the others, stay tuned for the next edition of the webinar series specifically focused on how COVID is impacting the sales function. Thank you once again.
Thank you.